Welcome to part 2 of Necromancy. Where we left off, Juhaki was about to bring the dead back to life. Juhaki was standing in the middle of the game room. This is where he was planning to make the 8 soldiers come back to life. It was night and snow was falling through the ceiling. Juhaki had made a hole in the roof so that cold winter air would preserve the dead bodies. It was an attempt to mimic the mummification ritual with a Nordic touch. He was gazing through the night sky, looking at the full moon, snowflakes touching his cheeks. He inhaled cold winter air through his lungs and then slowly exhaled. It was time to finish this. I shall open the barriers between the living and the dead. I shall break the gatekeeper's laws and bring them back. I shall bring them all back with this, and I shall live forever. Juhaki spoke to himself with the moon as his witness. He drew out his ritual knife while looking up into the night sky. With one fast and secure strike, he stabbed one of the bodies right in the chest, where the heart were supposed to be. With his knife, he ripped open the dead man's chest, so he could reach in and grab the lifeless heart and pull it out. He then leaned over towards his little box and took out one of the stone hearts. I have given you a new heart to beat life into you. A heart that pumps my blood through your veins, and you shall live to serve me at every command. My magic binds you to me, my magic is absolute over you. Ubu, Nekru, Moniku, I own you. Rivalari musani, Juhiki uniki sabi ultrali, unkuniku triska litvi ubnu nekrum monikim, monikinum. Seku Juhaki, Seku Juhaki, Seku Juhaki. And then he stabbed the next one in the chest, with passion glowing in his eyes. Then suddenly he was interrupted by howling and barking dogs from his dog kennel. Oxard, on the other hand, was a loyal creature, most likely falling asleep in the stables. But between him chanting his magic command was the cry of the dogs. It did irritate him. Yihubi uniki sabi. Those damn dogs. He tried to calm himself, to find some focus. This was, after all, his life's work, and it would take maybe a year or two before he could get another attempt. It became a screaming contest. Juhaki could not leave in the middle of the ritual. The dogs were also trapped, probably why they were howling. He had lost his passion and glamour in his words. Sedum, Sekum, Argot! He wasn't chanting anymore, he was shouting. It wasn't the magical accuracy in the phrases anymore. While he was working his way through corpse by corpse, replacing dead human hearts with new stone hearts, the barking continued throughout his work. After that, he worked with needle and thread to stitch together the chest and then close the wound again. Now only one thing left remained, waking them up to life and make them walk amongst the living once more. This was going to be his last push. He took a deep breath and inhaled cold winter air and closed his eyes. And then suddenly the dogs started to bark loud and clear once more. And the wind changed from gentle and ease to hard, gushing storms that throw itself on his windows and doors. It would just have to do. Somehow he must succeed throughout this night, betting it all on this one last fight. Juhaki took one of those deep breaths, a small meditation to cleanse out everything from outside of his own mind. With a slow inhale of cold winter air that flowed through his lungs. Hold it in, keep it safe, build it up and breathe it out, keeping it a slow stream of air that left his body. This was his way of conjuring power, building it up with air inside his body and then releasing it with direction and purpose. Something he achieved with chanting and singing. But he wasn't alone doing the orchestra. He was competing with dogs and blowing wind. His song started to convert to screaming more and more. Ibnak Shantarulu Nubu Unak Muniku Donikum. Why didn't I kill those dogs 5 years ago? But he had one more severe and life-threatening problem. The game room had become a bit too cold from having no ceiling, and he had stayed still inside it far too long. But Juhaki hadn't even noticed that his fingers had turned blue, because he was holding his hands close to his ears to shut out disturbing sounds. He was far too busy on forcing his essence out and into the dead. Is it over soon? Echoed in Juhaki's mind. I will rip this cabin apart, screamed the wind. Shut up and feed us, roared the hounds outside. There's something strange about that man, Juhaki, said Esmeralda to her husband down in the village. Just let me succeed, wished Juhaki. And then he made the last push and screamed out his command. Ibu Nekru Moniku, I own you. Come back to life and walk amongst the living under my command. And with that he lost his footing, or rather strength in his legs, and he fell down on the snow-bedded floor and collapsed. He didn't feel the cold snow on his face. Next to him was a dead man lying. He was maybe 10 years younger than Juhaki, but much better built. He looked strong. He looked dead. Stone dead. Nothing had happened. He didn't open his eyes or rise to his feet. One should feel a bit of horror from being close to a dead person that was supposed to start living once more. But nothing happened. Juhaki had failed. He closed his eyes and thought that he would only rest for a little bit. He didn't feel the cold that was slowly killing him, but after laying there for far too long, he suddenly felt something patting him on his head, trying to wake him up. The huge ox greeted his master when Juhaki opened his eyes. The ox had walked in to help his master, who was in danger of freezing to death. You are truly a loyal one, my friend. Juhaki rose to his feet. The dead was still dead, and in all regard Juhaki had failed. Strangely enough, he couldn't care. He was angry, sad, and disappointed all on the same time. But first of all, he was tired and cold. There was only one thing for him now, and that was a huge warm bed. I'm going to kill those dogs and eat them when morning comes, was the last thing he said that night, before he was completely covered up in pelts and other warm blankets. He woke unknowing what time it was, only that the door to his room was open, unable to miss the sound of foots walking on the floor, something barefoot, and something slamming heavily on the ground. Turning his body from belly to side to watch what was going on, he didn't trust his eyes. A young man quite well built met his vision. He stood at the end of the bed, relaxed, ready. Not a word was said. Juhaki could care less which one of the dead soldiers from downstairs this was. His skin was blue, grey, and looks quite cold. There was sharpness to his face. Impossible to tell if he was happy or displeased. My name is Juhaki, he started. I brought you back from death. I must be honest, however, that I first thought that I failed. But you're standing here right now, and that proves the difference. The young man didn't answer. He was only standing there and looking straight into Juhaki's eyes. Is something wrong? The same time Juhaki positioned himself better and sat up, something rose from the floor to standing. There was another one of the soldiers that had been lying on the floor. This one Juhaki recognized. In his first attempt to walk, the man fell. He was missing a leg. He didn't even seem to mind. No shouts out in pain, and he looked unaware that the leg was lost. Instead of one leg jumping, he actually attempted to walk normally. Juhaki had never seen anyone rise from the dead, and neither had anyone of his masters. He wasn't even sure how the outcome would be. All the knowledge he had on the matter was from forbidden books. Now this meant that he had surpassed all his masters in the West. But this was really careless. He hadn't cared much about what would happen if he succeeded. He had been so focused and driven to succeed, they had taken soldiers from different sides, not thinking about the fact they might continue to fight in his own house. But they were brain dead. The two soldiers were always looking straight in his face and followed his every move across the bedroom. Maybe this was for the better, for his better at least. He didn't need to think about the desires or wishes. He had at least two perfect test subjects. This was clearly not the grand goal he was aiming for, but he never had plans to achieve that goal with these ones. In fact, he had more objects to look at. There were a lot to argue that the ritual had failed in some points. It hadn't been done in the correct spirit and tone. There had been distractions. But they had to see if these ones were the only brain dead. Maybe the other 6 had different outcome. Rushing down the stairs made the 2 walking dead follow him, but they're in their own gentle speed. Interesting, they seem quite attached to me. With this realization, he did quite feel like a god. He stopped in front of the door to the game room. "Open this door for me," he said while looking at the soldier with 2 legs. In his own pace, he walked past Juhaki and grabbed the door handle. With grand force the dead servant did what was asked of him. He even held the door open so his master could walk through it. Juhaki had read that this art would make the dead your eternal slave. He had thought it would be in a more repaying ways, not literally speaking, obeying every command. But that's where the fantastic news took to an end. There was only one of the dead remaining. It was a much shorter person, better dressed and older, with a different position than a grunt soldier. He was standing completely still and looking straight forward, not moving anything. No one can of course be completely frozen state, but normal people need to blink. This one was above such human things. But him being without reach of contact wasn't the actual big problem. He had brought home 8, found 3. Where was the other 5? And where was the big meat cleaver he chopped off the leg to feed the hounds? And his ox! After opening the doors to the stable, he found his ox where it always should be, safe in its place. It even looked like it awoke from sleep and was ready to greet him. If his animal could talk, he could ask where the 5 walking dead had gone. This was the natural way of leaving the cabin. An oxard should have seen them walk by here. If it was a sign of old age or bravery, Juhaki couldn't tell. While petting his ox, the 2 dead followed after. They seemed locked on him. Wherever he went, they followed. Why hadn't that applied to the other 6? His animal seemed calm. That must be a sign that things hadn't gone over the edge. He had succeeded, that was for sure. It was his dream come true. In all years of doing his research, he never paused and thought about what really would happen. And he really needed to figure out what was happening right now. The one-legged man seemed to be making his way slow and steady, trying to take a step, then falling over, rising to his feet, make a step, and fall once more. Of course, he had an idea, and a great one for once. He ran into the middle of the game room. In slow time they followed. Then he ran up to his master bedroom and started to count, second by second. The two-legged soldier arrived first. He had the most dreadful eyes Juhaki watched into while he continued counting and waiting for the other one. You must have been a nasty one in real life. I don't even think we would make good friends. Yet he really didn't have much friends to start with. It took 3 minutes or so for the one-legged to reach the bedroom and to the spot where Juhaki had woken up. That meant that the other 6 must have had something to 6 minutes plus some extra time when Juhaki was downstairs. So in all they must have been alive for something about 10 minutes or so. But this was only if his theory was correct that the 2 soldiers that followed him around everywhere had gone straight to him. The two-legged had been standing at his bedside some time before he had woken up, but the one-legged had arrived about the same time that he did wake up. Alright, that means you can't have gone far yet, talked Juhaki out through the window. Somewhere out there, dead men were walking around, and he was responsible for them. Just like he was supposed to be responsible for those dogs. The dogs! He shouted out in quick realization. There had been no sound at all from the kennels, with good reason. They were all dead, slaughtered. Juhaki counted 5 dead dogs, 5 brutally murdered dogs. There were even bite marks, something you expect to get from dogs, not to find on dogs. It really did look like a battlefield, and in some weird way this was his doing. Not that he was saddened by what he watched, but he might not like to see what more he caused. He didn't know how fast they would actually walk. They might even run. That meant that they could have reached the village down the mountain. Esmeralda woke up at the usual time to feed the chickens, hungry creatures that might cost more than they earned. While she was throwing around the corns and seed, her vision found a strange figure walking towards the village. It was seldom anyone came to this remote place, so she was somewhat surprised. It was a tall figure, walking strong through the harsh wind. Even though he was light-dressed, he seemed carefree from cold.
Who goes there?
She spoke clear and loud to the stranger. It didn't feel right when she noticed that there was more coming up behind him, but also that he didn't give any response. She was, however, proud and righteous and knew that she hadn't done anything wrong. So whatever they could want with her, she would show them. But first, when they did come over the fence, did she see that he had a big meat cleaver with them. It looked more like something you execute people with, like cutting off someone's head. This wasn't something she was sure about, and even though they didn't look like it,
Bandits! Wake up, people!
she screamed and turned towards her house where her lazy husband was. For someone who passed the age of giving children and even started to lose hair, she had good and strong legs. But she was caught and pulled down on the ground. She gazed into dark, cold eyes. He was a young man and not from around here. In fact, he looked like one of those foreigners who were currently invading the country. But he looked mad. A fierce grip took her around the neck and started to squeeze. Stone cold hands and all the body weight hanging down on her poor throat. Realizing you're going to die, there's nothing you can do about it. Then another man came up behind them with the big meat cleaver. The huge blade was lifted into the air and came down to do what it was built to do, chop off heads. In the blade's descending swing, it took off the head of the strangler and the victim, 2 in one blow. The 4 warriors made their way into the sleeping village, leaving the real dead behind. Screams echoed through house to house, and folks were soon wide awake, unhappy with their visitors. Everyone was fast ready to arms. It became a small battle between living and past dead. Even though farmers and workers wasn't trained for any kind of battle, anger made the cut, and the living dead behaved irrational. They fought with hands and teeth. After many injuries, the village people had cut down all the intruders, and they were still moving. "Demons!" sounded through the masses. "They aren't even human!" As the neutralized zombie crawled without its head, a discussion of how they should be killed came up. Burning became the most popular idea, but during the dragging towards purifying fire, a discovery was made.
He has stitches on his chest. They all seem to have stitches on their chest. They must have been cut open at some time. It's the heart. Stab them in the heart.
And when they did, the creature did in fact die and became dead once more.
This is blasphemy. Someone did this to them. Look, this is a soldier from our own nation, and this one is from that invading country. You don't mean that? That's exactly what I mean.
And everyone knew what he really meant. Juhaki walked towards the cliff to get a better view. Usually this time there would be a strong mist concealing the entire valley, but for once he thanked the strong wind that held its grip over this place for some time now. Because of it, he could see everything clearly. It was some sort of activity downhill, quite lively too. Alone he stood there, wondering, fearing, and doubting. What had he done? And what should I do? Asking out into eternity, slowly he realized the potential of this problem. He looked at the kennel and then back down at the village. He couldn't know for sure what could be happening down there, but he was quite sure things were probably bad down there, and that would be really bad for him. Those people didn't have much love for him already. Now they might have a good excuse of getting rid of him. Juhaki went inside his cabin and barred the door behind him. He looked at the three soldiers and started to think. Well, it will probably come to this. Kill everyone that wants to hurt me, he said to them. And protect my ox too, he later added in. A few moments later, suddenly, people are banging on the door, commanding, "Come out here, Juhaki! You blasphemous evil!" The three soldiers went up to the door and started to use their shoulders and body weight to block it off even more. Juhaki felt something he had never felt before. For the first time in his life, he was giving command and orders. They were doing this for him. He was always the one taking orders from different masters or putting up with different problems. No one has ever done anything he asked for, except Oxard, come with me. The two left the stable and went inside to the game room.
This is your true colors, demon. You really did kill your own brother.
Lies, all lies. But what could he do? He had never really liked those town people. They wanted someone to blame everything bad that had happened here. The door had eventually too many cracks and was starting to give away. With pitchforks and axe, the people made their way forward. The soldiers did make a good mess and kept on fighting even when hacked to pieces.
Stab them in the chest. That is how to kill them. Pierce them in their heart.
And that did the job. The human horde was then making its way into this game room. In here, snow was now covering everything. It was even hard to make out the walls. Horns and animal heads was peeking out everywhere. Center Park were Juhaki and his only friend.
We've had it with you.
The people screamed.
You've been a curse on this place far too long.
He didn't answer. Instead he whispered, "If you kill them all, I will set you free." And then he opened the box and closed his eyes. He could hear the screams and pain from everyone, even someone flying across the room. When everything had quieted down, he closely opened his eyes again. He had been still and silent the whole time. Now everyone who had come after him was dead. bones splintered and skin ripped apart. It would take time to find a spirit of that sort once more. He walked over the corpse of his dead neighbors. At least I don't need to go and look for another battlefield. I'm glad you all came here with your own free will.